They have been trying to impeach the president from the moment of his inauguration for no reason, just because he won. The articles before you do not allege a crime or even any violation of the civil law. One article alleges obstruction of Congress simply for exercising long-standing constitutional rights that every president has exercised. The president was given no rights in the House of Representatives. The Judiciary Committee conducted only 2 days of hearings. You are sitting through your 6th day of trial. The House is demanding witnesses from you that they refused to seek themselves. When confronted with expedited court proceedings regarding subpoenas they had issued, they actually withdrew those subpoenas. They are now criticizing.
So we find the brother apparently is in the UK. There's so much here, and you're one of the first people to bring it to public attention. Thank you. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Tucker.
Well, the president's defense team wrapping up tonight on Capitol Hill during the impeachment trial. They say they're done for the day, but just moments ago, Alan Dershowitz responded to John Bolton's leaked allegations against the president. Here's what he said.
Now, it follows from this that if a president...
precedents that you have studied in this class and principles of democracy.
The Bolton manuscript, that would not constitute an impeachable offense. Let me repeat, nothing in the Bolton revelations, even if true.
That could never happen in America. But then you would be happy.
Alan Dershowitz speaking on the president's behalf in the Senate tonight. We'll be covering any news out of the impeachment trial right here on Fox, but for us, for this show, that's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m., the show that's the sworn and totally sincere enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Sean Hannity takes over next. Good night from Washington. And welcome to Hannity. We begin tonight a Fox News alert. Finally, the adults are up to bat, and they are absolutely eviscerating the Schumer-Shipsham show. Finally, the truth is being told. Finally. This ridiculous charade is getting ripped to shreds. The president's legal team is now upending methodically every single one of these deranged Democratic fantasy. Earlier today, Jay Sekulow, Ken Starr, others totally destroying what is nothing but 2 phony BS articles of impeachment. Same thing we saw with Alan Dershowitz, Pam Bondi delivering important facts about quid pro quo Joe and zero experience Hunter being paid millions. We'll play the highlights in the course of the show today, but first, let us dispel the media mob's latest round. Stormy, impeachment, Russia. Here we are. It's the same thing every day. Deranged Trump haters nationwide, they're rejoicing for the first time ever over the latest so-called bombshell from the New York Times. Same New York Times, I have an article that eviscerated, John Bolton when he got appointed NSC director. But anyway, perfectly timed hit piece. Framed over the weekend, the abusively biased New York Times hack, Maggie Haberman, whatever her name is, claiming the top secret unnamed sources. Top secret unnamed sources. How often have we heard that? Revealing that former National Security Advisor John Bolton will accuse President Trump of a Ukrainian quid pro quo in his upcoming book, while they simultaneously ignore the real quid pro quo with Joe. Now, listen closely. There are 5 huge glaring problems with their little report. 1, well, you never trust so-called journalists in the fake news industrial complex. 2, over the course of the Trump administration, get this, the New York Times has been dead wrong on story after story after story. Look at...
But at the end of the day, the most important thought is this. This choice belongs to the American people. They will get to make it months from now. The Constitution and common sense and all of our history prevent you from, and I would urge you to quickly come to that conclusion so we can go have an election. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Is recognized. Mr. Chief Justice, I ask unanimous consent that the trial adjourn until 1 p.m. Tuesday, January 28th, and this order also constitute the adjournment of the Senate.
Without objection, we are adjourned.
It is now 3 minutes past 9 o'clock here in Washington, D.C., and the Senate adjourning for the evening. Back tomorrow, a very familiar schedule.
Sources. Our third point, we have no record of John Bolton making any of these claims. None. 4, Bolton's attorney refused to confirm the contents of the Times report. And 5, both Mick Mulvaney and the Department of Justice have publicly refuted key claims in the article. They're saying it didn't happen. Well, that would impeach, I guess, whatever John Bolton's story is, if in fact that were true anyway. That would also mean if Bolton made such a claim, that would be contradicted by other people, and we know the president is contradicting it. So lurking in the background of this brand new manufactured scandal is Bolton's upcoming book. John Bolton, congratulations on your book deal. The publishers made pre-sales available around the very same moment the Times published the hit piece.
The anticipated part of this trial, obviously because of Alan Dershowitz's recent association with Jeffrey Epstein and his involvement in Jeffrey Epstein's legal defense. Professor Dershowitz was seen as a very controversial choice and has spent a long time since he was named to be part of this defense, defending himself in terms of his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. But his presentation, his sort of professorial presentation tonight on the floor of the Senate was that presidents can only be impeached for things that are violations of criminal law, which he acknowledged is something that the legal pantheon does not concede. He sort of finished by saying, I do my own research. I won't go with the crowd here. But it is, heading into this, Chuck, I'll put this to you first. I would not have thought that the president can't be impeached for something that isn't a crime would have been sort of a hill they were going to die on here.
Yeah, it seemed a little bit odd to me, Rachel. You know, he admitted that he changed his mind. That's fine, right? People change their minds. We shouldn't hold that against him. But he went from the great weight of legal authority and analysis to a distinctly minority position. And in fact, one of the people that he now stands in opposition to in holding that you need a crime or crime-like behavior in order to impeach is a fellow named Alexander Hamilton, who had something to say about this in Federalist 65. You know, the framers could not articulate every bad thing a president would do or could do in order to be removed. And so they left it somewhat vague, and they left the sole power to determine that in the House and the Senate. And as Dershowitz himself admitted tonight, he is in a minority position. We heard a lot of very thoughtful academics in the House explain precisely why abuse of power and trust ought to be impeachable, and I think that's where the better argument lies.
It is remarkable that this is really the apex of their case. I mean, they're doing this in prime time on Monday. They spent almost no time, they spent almost none of their hours on Saturday so they could finish up with Dershowitz in prime time on Monday night. They think this is the biggest audience they're going to get, and it was this sort of novel and experimental legal theory that impeachment isn't what you think it is, and therefore we should never use it.
For your families, you're taking care of your kids, you're obeying the laws, you're paying your taxes so that the Democratic mob and the mob in the media can do nothing but hate Trump 24/7. If you missed all the action, well, here's how it all went down.
Every time there's a policy difference of significance or an approach difference of significance about a policy, we're going to start an impeachment proceeding? Instead of a once-in-a-century phenomenon, which it had been, presidential impeachment has become a weapon to be wielded against one's political opponent.
The House manager's own evidence shows that President Trump did not condition anything on investigations during the July 25 call with President Zelensky and did not even mention the paused security assistance on the call.
The whole foundation of these proceedings was also tainted beyond repair because an interested fact witness supervised and limited the course of the factual discovery, the course of the hearings.
That's what truth, that's what evidence, that's what facts, that's what adults actually look like when they calmly, succinctly use truth reason they abandon hypocrisy, logic, and common sense to combat what is irrational rage towards the president and nothing but a political witch hunt. The Democrats' pathetic case, it is getting blown to pieces. They should be embarrassed. I guess they're not, because that's all they ever do. That's because tonight, like every night, there are 4 facts that will never change. Jim Jordan pointed them out. 1, we have the transcript. We have 2, actually. The president's phone conversations, with President Zelensky. There was 0 linkage between Biden and U.S. aid in the call. As a matter of fact, aid was never mentioned in the call. And by the way, both Trump and Zelensky and their foreign minister say there was 0 pressure. They never felt any, at any point, at any time, or any linkage, ever, whatsoever. 3, at the time of the initial call, Ukrainian officials didn't even know aid was temporarily paused, and they got it all. The Ukrainians took no action. They did nothing. They never announced they would do anything, and they never did anything. Oh, no pro or no quo, so no promises of an investigation whatsoever, nothing. And by the way, the aid was released ahead of schedule. I'll add a 5th. There were 5 subsequent high-level meetings with Ukrainian officials. The conditionality of aid, they never discussed aid in any of those 5 meetings, not one time. No discussion whatsoever. We know what ultimately happened here. The vote is a foregone conclusion. The Democrats do not have a case, but now they want the Senate to invent one for them. They know they failed. They want to keep the charade going for as long as possible. But it is not the Senate's constitutional role to impeach, nor is it the Senate's constitutional role to play clean up the House and the mess that they made. Because the sole power constitutionally is in the House to do the impeachment. They did the impeachment. The sole power of the Senate constitutionally is to have a trial based on the articles that are presented to them with whatever corroborating evidence they found that, well, warranted their so-called impeachment. Now, if there are any weak Republican senators, people you elected, they want to drag this out in perpetuity, they want to open up this Schumer Schiff show sham and let witnesses get up there that the House didn't even bother to subpoena. If Bolton gets hauled in, okay, if you're going to go down this road, that would mean that guy, the compromised, corrupt, congenital liar, Adam Schiff, and people that work for him ought to be hauled in. Now, we know he is, in fact, a fact witness in this case. His office, in spite of saying otherwise, they were in communication with the hearsay whistleblower from the beginning. And speaking of which, the hearsay non-whistleblower, well, should also finally get a call, and he should come in and testify because of a new report came out last week claiming that this person was overheard plotting President Trump's removal and impeachment 2 weeks into the Trump presidency. He was discussing it with another Obama holdover. This is early January 2017. And of course, well, you should also hear from 2 other key witnesses here. I'd be quid and pro and quo. Joe, you're not getting the $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor that's investigating my zero-experienced son, Hunter, who's being paid millions. Yeah, I think a lot of laws at stake here. As I've been arguing, it is the president's sworn constitutional duty to faithfully execute the laws of the land. Now, shaking down, blackmail perhaps, use whatever legal term, seemed to me that those ought to be looked into. What Joe did, got a guy fired. Oh, but if you listen to Adam Schiff, they did nothing wrong. I don't think so. Because what happened here is quite obvious. There's not a company in the history of mankind that has ever...
You have power over pain, so the whole world looks...
They're saying that they gave a single copy of the manuscript to the White House for this very sort of routine review that anyone who's worked in administration with the kind of access that someone like John Bolton did would have to undergo if they were writing a book. It's a national security review. And given that the Bolton team says they had nothing to do with this leak of the contents of the book.
I'm 71 years old, and when I said the Pledge of Allegiance, I was in class with other white kids and black kids, and we got along. I didn't understand the Pledge of Allegiance until I got older. My mother took us to vote when she went to vote, and I understood the power of the vote. And this is what it all boils down to. Donald J. Trump was trying to steal our vote. And when I say our vote, I'm talking about us, we as Americans.
Thanks for the call. This is from John Harwood, who...
There was cause to raise the issue about the Bidens and Burisma.
$1 billion taxpayer dollars, you're not getting it unless you fire him who's investigating Hunter with zero experience paid millions of dollars. Wow, that'd be the very same thing the media mob and Democrats are telling us is so bad that Donald Trump never did. Washington Post article said the appointment of the vice president's son to a Ukrainian oil board looks, well, like nepotism at worst, nefarious at worst. But anyway, quid pro quo Joe is literally on tape bragging about doing that, taking your money, leveraging it, shaking down maybe, to get taxpayer money, using our money to get a foreign prosecutor fired. Why would a vice president ever want a foreign prosecutor fired? Oh, he's investigating his son being paid millions. And by the way, they did, in fact, well, they did use Hunter's name in Washington to try and get them to stop the investigations into Burisma. Hunter Biden on tape admitting, you have any experience? No. Any experience in Ukraine? No. Oil? No. Gas? No. Energy? No. Why did you get the job? I don't know. Maybe because your father's the vice president in charge of all things Ukraine? Yeah, probably. Again, it is the president's sworn constitutional duty faithfully execute the laws of the land. Now, American taxpayer dollars are being used in a shakedown to get the vice president's son continuing monies from Burisma and a country, and he has no experience. That seems like it ought to be investigated. Nefarious behavior, well, if it happened to you, me, your kids, I don't think any of us would get that deal, now would we? And the greatest irony here is that without any hard evidence, Democrats are accusing the president of the exact same thing we know Hunter and Joe did, what Joe was bragging about on tape. They did it. Hypocrisy doesn't end there either. Remember, in 2012, just before the presidential election, President Obama, remember the hot mic, making a sketchy request from a foreign country to telling Medvedev, tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after the election. Remember this?
My last election, yeah. After my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah. I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir.
I transmit to Vladimir. Oh, what was the more flexibility? I call on Barack Obama to release the transcripts of every phone call that he had with Vladimir and top officials in Russia after he made his little promise there. We're going to get those released? Democrats' own logic, President Obama should have been impeached. More proof, impeachment is nothing more than a partisan witch hunt, and it is hurting our country. It's time to put this to an end. It's a charade, and in 281 days, I keep talking about the ultimate jury, you, we, the American people. Guess what? You get to shock the world again and choose our destiny. Here now, remember the president's legal...
Going to talk in another venue other than the...
Let's talk about how you felt the day went.
Why he would say yes to a subpoena from the Senate at this point.
In the session today, where several Republican members voiced their concerns about where things were headed. They were so unsettled, in fact, that one Senate Republican, Pat Toomey, raised an idea that's been pinging around the Republican conference for the last couple of weeks. Basically, if we're going to get to the point where witnesses are going to be pursued, we need to do a one-to-one exchange, one Republican witness for one Democratic witness.
Have come from different sides of the aisle. And with Kinstar this morning, you start off by saying, you know, there are no crimes alleged here. When you have completely partisan, not a single person from the president's party in the House voted to impeach. And then you've got this idea, he put that together, he said, even if you don't say that has to be a crime, it should be serious weight. And then add that tonight to what we heard all day was, oh, but will they address New York Times stories? Like this was something we were afraid of, like these media leaks, unnamed sources, trying to contradict, and the president's come out clearly and said no.
Overseen by Justice Roberts, and I think the idea that Justice Roberts is overseeing it is part of what Bolton has a lot of respect for him and any process that he would run. But clearly he also, I mean, it's right there in every statement from his lawyer, from others, that he really just has a story he wants to tell. He saw a lot, and You know, he is someone who clearly did, you know, the House decided not to move forward with that, and I think that I'd be curious to see whether he's contested any attempts by the House now to go back and have a do-over. But the Senate process is one that he clearly feels more comfortable in. I don't think it's, you know, you can't rule out that it's because it's being run by Republicans.
Carol Lee, NBC News correspondent, joining us to help us with this new breaking news reported by Carol about John Bolton's perception of what happened with his manuscript after he dropped it at the White House and his plans moving forward. Carol, thank you. I know you're in the middle of reporting further tonight. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
And I will say,
so that more journalists could do their jobs. The Bolton bombshell is not the last. I don't have any special knowledge, but I've been through this before, okay? If something exists, it is going to come out, I promise. And so these Republicans, they're betting that there are no other shoes to drop. And let me tell you, they're living in Imelda Marcos's closet. There's so many shoes. And so they're going to have to bet their career that there's no more information that's going to come out if they vote against witnesses. That is a very bad bet.
All right, now, in terms of what else could happen, they may have created a potential problem for them going forward. Jane Raskin, who, by all accounts, great lawyer, fundamentally important to this president during the Russia probe, she made an argument today about Rudy Giuliani and what he means in all this, or in fact does not mean, that may have some heavy implications. Listen to this.
Mr. Giuliani is just a minor player, that shiny object designed to distract you.
Then they'll debate the issue of whether or not they're going to have witnesses. Why would any Senate Republican vote to bring any other witness but those that were brought up in the House impeachment? Why are you going to bring in other people now? Why are you going to take on the constitutional role of the House? That's not your authority.
You're right. That's not their role. And if they made these comments after today, I don't know how they could make the comments. You always wondered how they cheated in the House side, why Adam Schiff never allowed the president's attorney inside the room. Today showed you why. His case has no facts. It doesn't hold. Even through all the lies that Adam Schiff has said, it was blown apart today. So if there's somebody in the Senate that thinks they need to call a witness, that they think they need to call Bolton, in the House, they did not even subpoena him. And it doesn't even matter what the New York Times allegedly says happened. You have the transcripts. You were right. It goes beyond those 4 facts. Those 5 facts never changed. You have all the facts you need. This does not hold ground. The American public wants us to move on and actually do the work we're supposed to be doing that we watch this president doing every single day.
From John Bolton that has just turned President Trump's world upside down. Joining us now is Mike Schmidt, who broke this story for the New York Times tonight, as well as last night's bombshell, along with his colleague Maggie Haberman. Michael, thank you for making time to be with us tonight. I know it's a busy time.
Thanks for having me.
So I wondered if you could reflect a little bit on the way your scoop has landed. I don't want to ask you to opine on its importance or its political ramifications. I basically just want to ask you if you think the country is getting it right. If you think that the scoop that you and Maggie had and this additional information is being assessed properly and that people are understanding what's important about it from the way you understand your reporting.
I'm not really sure that I've given that particular question a lot of thought. We've just sort of been concentrating on trying to learn as much as we can about what is in that manuscript. We believe that it's a critical document. Obviously, there's a lot of public interest in it. John Bolton was the highest profile person that could have probably been a witness at this trial, and we still have not heard from him, but we were able to answer some of the questions of what he would say. And we're just sort of putting our heads down here as we continue to try and learn more about that, to illuminate that question, which is hanging over this impeachment and in some ways hanging over the country.
Michael, one of the things that is unusual about the sort of timeline that you and Maggie have laid out in your reporting is the fact that the White House, if they've had this since the end of December, if they've had this since before New Year's Eve, and it has these incredibly simple and inflammatory claims that are directly related to the impeachment, it is hard to know how that didn't ultimately make its way to the president's defense counsel, to Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the Senate, or indeed to any of the other people who might be sort of decision makers in terms of the way the White House has approached this defense. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, so we only have really so many data points on that question. We know that the manuscript went to the White House on December 30th. We know that in recent weeks, the president has spoken publicly about how he does not want Bolton to testify. We know that the president's aides have pushed that notion, that the White House has communicated this to Capitol Hill, and that Mitch McConnell certainly knows that the president doesn't want him to testify. I think the White House knew for a long time that there could be problems if Bolton testified. Certainly when his aides testified and their statements came out, it was not good for the president. So Bolton was sort of always this big bad question for Trump. But if they saw the manuscript, it would certainly cement for them the notion that testifying by Bolton would damage the president.
The president has made sort of mixed messages, public messages about testimony, about whether he would welcome witnesses, what kind of witnesses he would like to hear from, what sort of complications there might be if witnesses were in fact asked to appear. Do you have any understanding now as to what sort of panic level the White House is at with renewed interest, based on your reporting, among Republican senators to get Bolton into the witness chair? Is the White House concerned enough about that that they might try to throw a real legal Hail Mary, that they might try to have some sort of restraining order, or they might try to blanket classify everything that Bolton might say? Do you know how they're going to approach this to the extent they see it as a threat?
So word about that sort of spread around today, that the White House was ready to go to court to try and prevent Bolton from testifying. They've done that with other witnesses, and certainly at this stage of an impeachment where you have John Roberts sitting there, I think it's a pretty complicated question about whether it would go to the courts or whether Roberts would decide it. But we heard a lot of churn about that today, and that the president was very upset and wanted to do everything he could to stop Bolton in the same ways that he has for the past few weeks. Look, the White House, at least some people at the White House, knew what we reported today many weeks ago, so this wasn't really a surprise to them. But what it does is it obviously puts that pressure on those moderate Republicans, and the real question that we'll have to see, and it certainly hasn't moved in the past 24 hours, not to the point that it's gone over the edge, is that is there enough pressure to get at least 4 Republicans to vote with the Democrats to call Bolton as a witness?
Mike Schmidt, Pulitzer Prize-winning correspondent with the New York Times. Congratulations on this groundbreaking reporting, Mike. Thanks for making time to be with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I will say, we're going to take a break in just a second, but I will say the Bolton developments, and if they are going to keep trickling out, if there are a number of people who have seen this manuscript and now people know that it's out of the bag, people know who have read it, what's in it, if this is going to be a daily news dribble in terms of what Bolton has to say, the political pressure to actually hear from him in this context is going to become inexorable, won't it?
Yes, and the Republican senators are upset.
And they have a pretty fair interpretation. Here with reaction, Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson and Florida Congressman Michael Gates. Congressman Johnson, a member of the president's impeachment team. Mr. Congressman Johnson, we'll start with you. Your take. I actually think this was a beatdown. It was a systematic, they ripped this case apart top to bottom, sideways and every way in between, and they had a great team doing it.
I'm so proud of this legal defense team. I've litigated cases in federal court for 20 years before I got to Congress. I've never seen a team work so efficiently and effectively. Almost no one is watching this anymore. As that previous clip indicated, most of America has tuned out. And the only bad thing about that, Sean, is that they're not seeing how we're systematically and utterly destroying the House manager's case. They brought nothing to the table. We've shown that pretty clearly. And at the end of this, I think the Senate's going to find that conclusively.
Well, I think you're probably right there, too. And let me go, if I can, Michael Waltz, your take watching all this unfold today.
Yes, Sean, I was just down in my district, and we're independent line back to the Senate impeachment trial. What do you think?
Made a lasting impact through their work. So shine a light on the trailblazers.
Singular comment is on the process that's been discussed throughout the proceedings, and that is about calling witnesses at this late stage. I doubt most Americans have ever sat in the U.S. Supreme Court hearings, and I have. And there,
there are no witnesses. It's a very somber hearing. The two sides of the arguments present directly their case without witnesses. The work has to be done before the court is assembled. So I believe that's what we should be focusing on, a straightforward process without drama, distractions by the mainstream media, no witnesses needed at this stage. I could speak longer, but I wish to reserve the balance of my time to the next caller.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much. You made our night.
Have fun.
This is from Joanne in California. What are you Republicans afraid of? Why are Republicans stopping evidence from coming before the Senate? Phoebe is joining us, Orlando, Florida, on the Republican line. Good evening.
Hi there. Excuse me. I've been a Republican for 42 years, and I've never been so ashamed of this party in my whole entire life. I don't think many people understand the Constitution, maybe haven't read it, maybe never read the Federalist Papers, but Trump definitely violated the law. The GAO proved that. You are not allowed to go to a foreign country and have them interfere in our election. I don't believe it was about corruption, because if we were worried about Joe Biden being corrupt, then we have a mechanism to take care of that. We go to our own Justice Department. Why would you ask a corrupt country to investigate him? I think it was definitely on his personal benefit. I've never, ever heard of a court having no witnesses and no testimony. And by him refusing that, what other defendant gets to say or pick, no, you don't get to have any evidence. You don't get to have any witnesses. There's no other defendant that does that. Innocent people do not hide witnesses, and they do not hide testimony.
So Phoebe, let me just jump in. If we get to witnesses and the Democrats say, okay, we want John Bolton, and the Republicans say, fine, we want Hunter Biden, what do you think of that?
I don't think that Hunter Biden has anything to do with this. Now, if the Justice Department thinks that Hunter Biden has been involved in some kind of broken any kind of laws, any kind of corruption, then I think our Justice Department needs to investigate that. A lot of people are making comments about how much he made and saying he's not qualified. He's a legal consultant. People would be amazed at how much people like that make. I worked for the Department of the Army for 25 years, and I now work in hospital administration. There are hospital CEOs that make a lot more than what Hunter Biden made. But if there's a valid reason, then we have our United States government to investigate it. We do not have a corrupt country investigating it.
Phoebe, I'll leave it there. Thanks for the call. And I want to go back to the story that we talked about earlier from Robert Costa of the Washington Post, indicating that Senator Pat Toomey, he's a Republican from Pennsylvania, proposing a one-on-one witness deal in the Trump impeachment trial. Add Toomey to the list of senators who are considering witnesses.
Absolutely, and wouldn't we love to see those financial records, Sean? I mean, listen, he had a lucrative board position on a company, as we know, in Ukraine that was dealing in natural gas, despite not speaking Ukrainian, having no experience in the region, and having nothing to do with natural gas at all. And you know, Sean, one thing I heard a reporter say today, because I can see they're trying to flip the narrative because the media's just been gross on this story and pathetic, said something to the effect that Ted Cruz, like, you know what, this is all about just a guy getting using his connections to get a job. No, that's not what this is about. This is about the son of the vice president going to work for a company that was under an investigation, and the vice president demanding the guy investigating him be fired. That's what this is about.
Found that Monsanto's popular weed killer Roundup was a substantial factor in
partial trial, and I, at this point in time, plan on renewing that motion.
All right, it went down in a straight party line vote the first time. We'll see what happens if it comes up again.
That's when McConnell had everybody lined up in advance to say no. If we have the vote to allow witnesses and documents, this is the fairest way to resolve which witnesses and what documents.
I hear the case. We'll see how it plays.
All right.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you.
Good to be with you.
All right, so where is this headed after today? Are witnesses more likely? Why not? And that back and forth with Van Hollen. What happens if there are enough votes for witnesses and the Republicans get to pick theirs? Do you really think the Chief Justice will police what the Republican senators want? We'll discuss it next.
It's his book, Larry. So then let me ask you this. Okay, maybe a few weak Republican senators, yeah, we need more witnesses. They did such a horribly poor job. We'll take on the constitutional role of the House, even though it's their sole power to impeach. Well, then you got to bring in Hunter. You got to bring in Joe. You got to bring in the congenital liar. You got to bring in the hearsay non-whistleblower whistleblower.
Right.
What's fair would be fair. Get to the bottom of all of this. How do you think that vote goes down?
They won't. The Democrats won't go along with that. They don't want Joe to testify. They don't want Hunter to testify, and they most certainly don't want Adam Schiff to testify about his contact with the whistleblower before the whistleblower even went to the IG. So it's not a deal. It's not a deal that they're going to.
So do they do it all at once?
I agree with Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
There ought not be any witnesses. They should have put on the witnesses on the House level, but it doesn't really matter because Maxine Waters already said she's going to continue, so there'll be a subpoena for Joe Biden, for John Bolton either way. Ultimately, it will be resolved in the courts as to whether or not executive privilege will prevent him from testifying under oath. But if he wants to write a book, have a press conference, tell people what he saw, he can do that now.
They can either put all the witnesses into one vote, Dan Bongino. Well, first, all right, should we call Adam Schiff? Let's call the roll. Democrats all vote no. Hunter, no. Joe, no. The hearsay non-whistleblower, no. Republicans are going to watch that and then say, bring in John Bolton?
Yeah, but here's the problem, Sean. We got a bunch of chump, weak-kneed Republicans up there. That's the problem. We got a bunch of good guys, but we got this small crew. You know, we got Mittens out there and other ones leading the charge. You know, Mittens, this guy loves everyone who will hurt the president. It's an embarrassment.
All right, guys, good to see you both. When we come back,
the political climate feels like, or are there individual conversations and individual senators who are having those conversations?
Yeah, there are individual conversations, but no one comes up and says, I'm definitely with you no matter what they do to me, you know, that kind of thing. But there are, in the fact that Senator Toomey today, who had not said a thing about witnesses, was talking about witnesses. The fact that when they came out of their lunch, usually they're all united and we're going to move forward and this witnesses and documents thing is bull. And all McConnell could say to them is keep your powder dry, because he knew he was losing ground. So there are, you know, when you're around here, you pick up all the signals. And at least today, things are moving in our direction. I don't want to get too optimistic, but we're making progress, and the reason is because our argument is right. A trial, you know, you had Mr. Starr argue that we are a trial, that we are on a trial. Well, what trial do you know that doesn't have witnesses and documents?
Senator, I again don't want to get too far ahead of this.
Taken by someone who chose to
Witness chair. One of the things that everybody has now started gaming out is the means by which the White House might still try to keep him quiet. They might assert some sort of privilege. They might try to classify his testimony or the material that he has put in his book. They might try to have a restraining order on him. All sorts of things are being described in terms of what the White House might try to pull even if he is approved, if a subpoena is approved for his testimony. What do you make of those reports, and what kind of planning are you doing inside your caucus about that?
Well, first, there's one reason the White House wouldn't want to do all of that. They want to get this over as quick as possible. They would have tried, had they been able to vote dismissal the day after Christmas, had Nancy Pelosi sent them the articles right then and there. So they don't really want to drag it out because odds are very strong that new evidence will come out, just like what came out with Bolton yesterday, and now there's a few new revelations, at least in the New York Times tonight, about the book, and conversations with Erdogan and conversations with Orban, and who knows what was promised there. We do know that certainly in Turkey, the Trump organization has actual financial interests. I don't know what the articles, if it alleges that, it probably doesn't, but who knows? So I'm not sure they want to drag it out. And second, Trump is talking about what was said. You can't claim privilege on somebody else and talk about it yourself, because if it's privilege, no one should talk about it. So the idea that they can drag this out for months, I don't think will happen. I think the courts are going to regard any claim of privilege skeptically because Trump is talking about it, and because in a Senate impeachment trial, the Senate has far more rights to get the information than the House did. If the Chief Justice signs the subpoena, I think, A, the courts are going to be very reluctant to overturn it and very reluctant to drag it out.
Senator Schumer, this is Maya Wiley, your constituent.
Hi, Maya.
How are
Yes. Yes, no longer in city government,
No
right,
longer
Maya?
in city
But
government.
Thanks for your service to New York City.
But always in service. My
Yes.
question is, I think you make a very important point about the fact that the Republicans don't want this to drag out, and that's clearly true for all the reasons you stated. There's also the question of how long the Democrats are comfortable with the process continuing, given the election cycle, given that you have 4 senators there who themselves would like to be on the campaign trail. Is there a timeline for Democrats on if the Republicans were willing to agree to a deal on witnesses, or at least a deal that says, let's go to the courts and let's ask the courts together to expedite a decision on what's privileged and what's not? What's the Democrats' drop-dead date?
Two good questions. Let me answer both. First and foremost, we want the truth. We want the facts. This is very serious stuff. And we want the documents. We haven't tried to be dilatory. We just have 4 sets of documents and 4 witnesses, all of whom were eyewitness contemporaneous to what happened. So our goal would be to get the truth out as quickly as possible. We don't want to truncate it so we don't get the truth. But I think if things continue to move, both sides will want to get this thing done, will not want to drag it out. As for the presidential candidates, I'm sorry. They have a greater responsibility than on being on the campaign trail. They have the responsibility to be here. And when no candidate has even requested, to their everlasting credit, the Senate candidates that are still running, to speed it up or to not have any events on this day or that day.
Chuck, a quick $60 trillion over 10 years, correct?
Well, we have political opponents.
You don't know. You don't know how much your plan costs.
You don't know. Nobody knows. This is impossible.
You're going to propose a plan to the American people, and you're not going to tell them how much it costs?
$94 trillion New Green Deal.
Worked under Bolton, who testified and said that he was there. Here's what happened. Bolton has access to reporters, as we all know. If there was something that was not true, we would have heard that, right? He was radio silent. But
He also never said anything about these big concerns,
Right.
Which is the president. So,
but he said it behind closed doors at fundraisers.
yes, fair point. So the president says, and we don't have to put up the statement because there are a lot of things in what he put out in the tweets today that are demonstrably false. So let's try to keep the record as clean as possible. But he denies having ever told John Bolton. All right, let's just leave it at that. For that to be true, John Bolton would have to be lying about the president having told him and having no supporting proof, that which would help him. He doesn't have to have it, but that's a problem. All of these people that you were referring to, who said, Bolton told me, go to the lawyer. I told him this. He said, go to counsel. They're lying, right, in terms of just the universe of it, because that's very convenient to Bolton, so how is that not true? Going to Barr would now have to say, this never happened. He never came to me about this.
And
There's a lot of layers of
He'd
credibility.
have to give back his book advance.
He'd have to get back his book.
So there's a pattern. Everybody who's testified under oath is telling a rather similar story. And yet the president and his lawyers say they're lying. And they keep saying anybody that reveals something bad about the president is lying. And at some point, I think we have to realize that maybe they're not lying, that in fact, maybe they're telling the truth, and it's the president who may not be actually telling the truth. And so that's one thing. That's one thing. At some point, the realization has to kick in. The second is, I think this also applies to the lawyers. The deeper we go into this trial, the lawyers take even greater and greater liberties with the facts and the law. And at this point, and I've said this before, but I still feel it strongly, I think they are actually violating rules of professional conduct because they're engaging in misleading, false statements repeatedly.
Cipollone, just an easy one. Cipollone said today, and they've all said this several times, why didn't they ever ask Bolton to testify? That's demonstrably false.
Right.
And that's going to come back. Go ahead.
Right, and Bolton said, I will sue you if you ask me to testify, right? And we're going to be in court forever. But think about it, what really confirms what we are hearing from this book are the president's own actions. Look at his actions towards Turkey and Erdogan. In an interview a few years ago before he was even president, he said that he was conflicted because he had towers and he had business in Turkey. He had Erdogan come to the Oval Office and try to convince those around him, including Lindsey Graham, about why it was fine to just throw the Kurds under the bus. Look Look at his actions with China. Look at the business dealings even his children have with China. The president is all about making trade deals and all about these unilateral trade relations.
And he'd be the first person I've ever seen in a major situation who hides his own alibi. He says he has people who can clear him, that the documents clear him, and he won't offer them up. All right, we got to take a break now. We're going to turn back to the trial, no question about that.
1 week away, and this is the Real Clear Politics average, and what it shows is Bernie has been moving up, Warren and Buttigieg have been moving down. Today, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, there were 4 candidates who are 15% or above. Remember, that's the magic threshold to get delegates. Warren has now fallen underneath the 15%.
And hunt for witnesses for you. Look what this gentleman and this president has done in 3 years with no support from the Democrats. Can they imagine where we would be had they supported him and where this country would be? I know Hillary said that, will you support me if I'm elected? He said, we'll see. They have done nothing to support this president.
Well, John, just because we want to deal with the facts, the one clear exception is that Democrats did support USMCA overwhelmingly, and the president's going to sign that later this week.
Right, but also in regards to that, anything that he's done on a positive note, on that day, they've made sure that they've had negative publicity. The other day, when he was after the China deal, that's when they walked the articles over. They don't give him anything. This is personal, and I think people need to understand that what he did is not, I don't consider it, attacking or going after the election. And really, if you want to say it, the Democrats are doing the same thing. Adam Schiff has sat there and given testimony that we cannot have this man around for the next election. They've lost. They've dropped the ball. They cannot beat him, and they know that. And the only way to get him out is to get him elected.
John, I'll leave it there. Again, this is the headline that has been generating so much attention. The reporting of Maggie Haberman and Michael Schmidt from the jump page of the New York Times. The president tied the Ukraine aid to demand for inquiries. That from John Bolton, again, his new book, which is officially released on March the 17th. Tom in North Hills, California, Independent Line. Good evening.
Great theater that I've watched all this time now, but my hat goes off to Pat Bundy and that following attorney, and then Dershowitz following them all up with the Constitution. I mean, this is just a joke. And one little bone I got to pick with C-SPAN. Did C-SPAN get paid not to have their cameras in there? Or how did that work out where they didn't want us, the American people, to see how lazy, how many times they were walking out, not paying attention, sleeping? How did that come about, if I might ask?
Sure, I can answer it for you. The Senate, well, first you have to go back to 1979 when the House agreed to television in the chamber. The deal was that the House would control those cameras. The Senate has the same agreement. We did put a request in for our cameras for this trial because of the historic nature of what was about to unfold, and that was denied. One of the few exceptions where you can see cameras in the House or Senate chamber is during the State of the Union, which, by the way, is next Tuesday evening. The networks are allowed to have pool cameras, so you're able to follow the president in and out of the House chamber. But by and large, even in our Senate documentary, we had a lot of restrictions in terms of what we could and could not shoot, and that was for a documentary. So we did try, we did put the request in. We very much would love to have our cameras in both the House and in the Senate, but that is continually denied by Senate leaders or House leaders, respectively.
We could not shoot, that was their documentary.
Tom, you still with us?
Yeah, I sure am, Steve.
So that's the answer. We're going to move on.
Well,
you have a final point?
Very much, and love C-SPAN, Steve.
Well, we appreciate that. And we'd love to have cameras in the Supreme Court as well, but that is another story. A reminder that we're back tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Time with C-SPAN's Washington Journal, and we'll get your reaction to day 2 of the President's Defense Lawyers tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Also, we'll be joined by Tom Steyer, who's with us at 9 a.m. Eastern Time from Des Moines, Iowa, part of our Campaign 2020 coverage. The Senate is back in session at 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. We'll have it live for you here on C-SPAN 2. And the president back on the campaign trail. He is in Wildwood, New Jersey. You can watch the rally live on C-SPAN 3 on the web at cspan.org or the free C-SPAN radio app. That gets underway at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN 3.
Take control of
talk about and testify about, but really, I think right now the issue before us is that there is so clearly much more evidence that is out there to support the evidence we already have and to just bolster the arguments that have already so strongly been made by the House managers.
In terms of the evidence that is out there, we just talked with Senator Schumer about how this is a sort of Watergate-esque drip, 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 that new information keeps coming out all the time.
Yeah.
I was struck earlier today by one of your Democratic colleagues, Senator Doug Jones of Alabama, suggested that even if for some reason you can't get John Bolton subpoenaed to appear as a witness, then maybe the Senate should at least subpoena his book and try to obtain the information that way, which struck me as kind of an odd approach to it. But I think people are starting to get creative now, thinking both in terms of how the White House and Republicans might try to keep this stuff bottled up, but also ways that Democrats might try to pry some of this stuff loose. How advanced are those conversations among you and your colleagues?
I think it's a great idea that we get the manuscript, but really the best evidence is John Bolton himself. And that's where we should start, where we can have him, we can ask him questions. And again, he'll be subject to cross-examination because certainly the President's Defense Counsel have a right to cross-examine him as well. So let's bring him forward, and then everyone can test their theories, including his ability to tell the truth in an unbiased way. But let's start with the witnesses. And Chuck Schumer, was right to send the letter immediately saying and outlining 4 witnesses that we need to hear from that are critical, John Bolton being one of them, former members of the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. But let's also have the documents, because there has been an outline of documents that range from those in the Department of Defense to the Department of Energy that will clearly support a lot of the testimony we've already heard.
The president's lawyers today approached the defense of the president from a few different angles. We got an impassioned case today that President Obama should be impeached today, not President Trump. There was also a long discussion from one of the president's lawyers today, really going after the Biden family, going after Vice President Joe Biden and going after his surviving son, Hunter, for a long time and with a lot of relish. I wonder how that lands with you, how it lands in the room, and whether this is going to effectively, accomplish some of the president's goal to put Joe Biden on trial in front of the American people instead of himself.
Well, everything they did today in that regard, Rachel, was completely predictable. I mean, first of all, let's all be honest that Donald Trump has been obsessed with Barack Obama, so it is not surprising that his attorneys would try and yet again revisit the excellence of Barack Obama's presidency. But coupled with that, when we're talking about the Bidens, this is about basically red herrings to distract from the issue that is before us, which is that the President of the United States elicited from a foreign head of government an investigation and an attempt to have an American citizen who happens to be the former Vice President of the United States and wanted that investigation to take place for his personal and political benefit. That's the allegation, and any facts that relate to that are relevant, and nothing else is. So it's not only a red herring, I think also for political purposes, it's red meat for the president and who he thinks will support him and why they will support him. But the reality is that it is clear that this has nothing to do with the issues before the United States Senate, which is to determine what the president's conduct was as it relates to his outreach to President Zelensky and also his ability in Article 2 of the impeachment to try and cover it up.
Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat of California. Senator, thank you so much for taking time tonight. I know it's been a long day. All right, we've got much more ahead here tonight. More news, and we're going to be talking with one of the
actually work, and that shutting down a city makes the distribution of food and medical care a huge challenge. Even those who support quarantine say this one
execute whenever he felt like it, and the 5 World Championship rings attest to that.
We should expect a break every 2 or 3 hours, and then at 6.
Seems likely to begin question and answer.